Welcome, everybody, to the Midweek Extras This Week in History on the Detecting History podcast. I'm Casey McDoyle. So, excitingly, this week, when I was doing my searching and trying to work out what happened in history this week, there was quite a significant event. On the 21st of January 1649, a reigning monarch was formally sentenced to death by his own people. Today, we're talking about the execution of Charles I, the man who made it possible, Oliver Cromwell, and how their conflict reshaped Britain forever. So by the late 1640s, England was a bit broken. Years of civil war had torn the country apart. So a lot of us will find a lot of musket balls out and about when we're doing detecting. There's a little bit around my area where I am. And basically the civil war has taken place. And the town close to me is actually where Oliver Cromwell was at one point, and it's got the little blue plaque on there. So Charles I had ruled since 1625, as I say, and believed absolutely in the divine right of kings. He saw himself as chosen by God, accountable to no one on earth. Parliament increasingly disagreed. Disputes over things such as taxation, religion, and royal authority escalated until war became unavoidable. And out of this chaos emerged Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell was not born into royalty. He was a country gentleman and deeply committed Puritan. At the start of the Civil War, he was politically insignificant, but Cromwell proved to be formidable in terms of a military leader. He helped create the new model army, a professional fighting force driven by discipline, religious conviction, and loyalty to Parliament rather than the crown. By 1646, Parliament had defeated the royalist forces. Charles I was captured, and at this point the war could have ended. But Charles refused to accept defeat. While in captivity, Charles secretly negotiated with multiple factions, and he attempted to play his enemies against one another, believing he could regain power. In 1648, he made a deal with the Scottish forces, triggering a second civil war. For Cromwell, this was like the last straw and unforgivable. He had fought to defeat the king, not to see England plunge back into bloodshed, but to Cromwell and the army, Charles was no longer a misguided ruler, he was actually a dangerous threat to peace. Cromwell concluded that as long as Charles lived, England would never be stable. That was the moment where the compromise ended. So there was a trial. In January 1649, a High Court of Justice was established to try the king. This was unprecedented. Charles was charged with treason, not against the crown, but against the people of England. He refused to recognise the court, repeatedly asking by what authority they judged him. Cromwell's influence was unmistakable. The army supported the trial, and Parliament was purged of any members that opposed it. So in some ways, Cromwell was becoming a bit of a tyrant himself. On the 21st of January 1649, Charles I was found guilty of tyranny, murder, and betraying his people, and the sentence was death. 9 days later, on the 30th of January, Charles was led to the scaffold erected outside the banqueting house. The atmosphere would have been sombre and tense. It was quite an event, these kind of things. Lots of people would have turned up to watch. Charles wore extra clothing so that the shivering and the cold would not be mistaken for fear, note the records. And with a single blow, the king was executed. England had crossed the line from where there was just no return. So after the king's death, the monarchy was abolished. England became a commonwealth. Cromwell did not initially seek kingship, but power steadily consolidated around him and the army. And by 1653, Cromwell dissolved Parliament and ruled as Lord Protector. Sounds a bit like a king, right? Ironically, England now had a ruler with powers many felt resembled those of a king. Surprise, surprise. Charles I was executed for ruling without consent, and Cromwell justified his authority as necessary to preserve order and godliness. History would judge both very harshly and ambivalently. So, what does this moment tell us? This tells us it changed Britain permanently, and after 1649, monarchy was no longer untouchable. It had been proven. Even when the monarchy was restored in 1660 by Charles II, kings ruled with the knowledge that Parliament and the people had once held a monarch accountable in the most final way possible. The execution of Charles I, driven in large part by Cromwell's conviction that peace required radical action, reshaped the balance of power in Britain forever. So last week we talked about coronation. This week we've talked about an execution. But together they show two extremes of power in British history, because once a nation kills its king, no crown ever sits securely again. And that was this week in British history. Okay, until next time, we've got a very exciting interview coming at the weekend, so make sure you tune in. Remember, go and check out Regton's. We have a promo code DH Podcast, 10% off some, but not all items. Try your luck, and you'll find you'll get yourself some pennies off at the till. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.